Hi everyone, welcome to this introduction to Continuum. Now before we start, I just want to say that Continuum is really something that you need to experience for yourself to understand what it means to you. And although I'm hoping that this introduction can be helpful and serve as sort of a taste and a little mini exploration or explanation of what Continuum can be, I would definitely recommend finding yourself a class. It's really great if you can do a live class and be immersed in a group of people that are doing Continuum all in the same place, just because that can also help sort of draw you into the experience. But in the meantime, to just give you sort of a beginning feel for what Continuum is, I've created this little introductory video for you to explore. So if Continuum had a goal, I would say the overall goal is to really be able to know and experience the movement of ourselves and all the various parts and pieces of ourselves. Through Continuum, we develop our ability to sense and feel into our own bodies. And Continuum explorations have a way of guiding us into being able to feel our own support, our own nourishment, our own emerging creativity. And not only in the Continuum explorations, which we call dives, but also the effects of spending some time in these explorations or dives really begins to ripple out into our lives so that we can be with the movement through our lives in a different way. And so through Continuum, we intend to really discover and access our own fluid intelligence within our own systems. And at certain places we think of our system as like maybe our body, but also our planetary system, our cosmic system. And so we intentionally feel into the fluid intelligence within our systems. And we use sound and breath and attention to be with this, to be able to know the fluid intelligence that's resonant through all of our systems. Now, when I talk about sounding, what I mean by that is we use our voice and our breath. And we use the sound as a tool of exploration. So essentially, sound is just breath made audible. That's it. And in this case, we're using internal sound. So we're using our own human voice as a tool to both meet, explore, and affect the tissues and the fluids in our body. Usually the sounds are very simple sounds, something maybe like an O or an E or sh. But there's lots of them. The sounds in general are sounds that would be found in nature and come from nature. And we don't use words, so we don't use verbal sounding. We don't use any kind of mantra or anything that might have an assigned meaning. And part of that is because we want to dip below that place in the brain where we organize and interact through the verbal levels of speech. We want to dip below that, and that helps us to be able to kind of dip under the cultural veil of sort of our everyday lives, the fetch wood, carry water aspect of ourselves. We want to, in Continuum, we want to kind of get below that. And I'm not discrediting any other forms of verbal sounding at all. It's just not what we do in Continuum. It's not the way we explore so much in Continuum. And the way we use sounding is actually as a form of calling to our unconditioned nature, our fluid intelligence before we put it in the boxes of organization that we might use to live in our everyday cultural lives. The other thing is sounding is actually a great way to begin to focus breath and direct our attention. So it might be easier to put attention into a specific area when we're directing sound there versus just trying to focus or use breath there. And so that's another reason why sound can be such a powerful tool for exploration. So how do we use sound in the body? What do we do in a dive? What happens? So essentially there's many things that can happen in a dive, but with sound particularly, we use sound as sort of a call and response to our bodies, to our own fluid intelligence within our bodies. So we'll apply a sound. We might direct that to a certain area of the body or sometimes even maybe outside of the body. But we send the sound to a certain place or we call it out in a certain way. And then we take some pause time. So we call this time often moments of open attention where we're just letting go of the sounding and we're just noticing what's happening now. What is the body's response to the sound? What's stirring? What's moving? And then at points, we might also encourage just kind of taking the brakes off to something called what we call open movement, where we just take the brakes off and we let the body respond. So essentially sound is used as in a call and response manner. We are calling out to our bodies, to our fluid intelligence. We're sending a sound in to see what changes, what is the response, what's here even. And then we open up and listen for the response of our tissues. So what do we know about how sound effects matter, how sound can affect the body? Sound can make matter move because sounding actually increases the conductivity and the fluidity in our body tissues. Increased fluidity really can lead to increased ease of movement. When we're coming from sort of a more of a gel state or more of a solid state to more of a fluid state, there's more ease that's happening there in our system. So the sounding helps with more fluidity, and the more fluidity can lead to more ease, more resiliency in our system, different options for being able to move in different ways. We begin to have more increased capability for more diverse responses. When we have more options for ways to respond, we then can start to see and feel and experience those other options for our ability to engage in the world. So sounding can be an important part of that, establishing and beginning to have new patterns, especially when we're sounding in ways that, again, we're getting under that cultural veil of our normal, maybe everyday lives, fetch wood, carry water conditioning. And we're starting to access our more creative, unbound, internal fluid intelligence and more innate wisdom from our system. Also, I just want to mention in terms of fluidity that when there's an increased fluidity in our system, we have an increased ability to dissolve. And we also have an increased capability to be able to rest more deeply into the support that we have at different points in our lives, whether that's the floor beneath us or a mat beneath us or a chair or simply resting our feet on the earth. As we're able to feel more fluidity in our systems, we're able to soften and sort of meld with the different areas of support in our lives. Okay, so now that we've touched on a bit of an introduction, I would like to talk a little bit more specifically about what we call a dive in Continuum. And essentially a dive is just a particular experiment that we're exploring with either for that class or that workshop. So it's usually a particular sequence that we're going to be exploring that's laid out, and it might be looking at a particular motif, either within our bodies, something in nature, just something in life that we want to sort of use that motif to explore. And the teacher will usually have you lay out a sequence where we might have particular sounds that we explore with. It might be suggested to do this exploration in a particular position. So, it could be lying down, it could be sitting up, it could even be standing on your side. There's endless possibilities of how a dive could be set up. But essentially, it's a sequence to explore and be with. Now, it's always going to be important to honor your own system. So if anything is ever uncomfortable or feels like too much, then you can certainly adapt for your comfort level. But there is also something sometimes in being able to meet some of the places in discomfort. So not push through them, but maybe just explore a little bit, see what's there. Sometimes you might come up to an edge of maybe a little bit of pain or discomfort, and that might be a time to slow way down, maybe meet what's there, see if you can soften in or feel into some other resources that you have for yourself, some other sources of support, and just see what unfolds. It's always important to stay curious, to enter into the dive with a spirit of exploration, a spirit of curiosity, and let yourself be surprised by what might unfold or what might happen in your body or what might be there for you in terms of support that you didn't even know was there. We always keep our eye out for sources of nourishment, the possibility of pleasure or eros. Just noticing in our bodies where there might be places of resistance or rigidity, where we move, where we don't move so well. So really I would say the key components as you're coming into dives for the first time is to honor your own body, to stay curious, and to have a space of observation so that you can notice and see what's arising. And this will lead to developing deeper and deeper levels of sensitivity, and also knowing these different options as they open up within ourselves, different ways we might be able to respond or experience our own fluid intelligence and let ourselves be moved. Okay, so usually with a dive, we always begin with an opening baseline. And all that means really is just a time of noticing what's here now. It's not a time where we need to try and change anything or do anything differently, but we're just open to the noticing. It's a space of open attention, essentially. And so it might be a good idea during an opening baseline to first just notice your breath. How is your breath moving through your body right now? And then notice, how am I able to rest into the support that's beneath me? What areas of my body are able to soften to the support? What areas of my body are not able to soften into the support? What areas of my body are holding? Are there areas of freedom? Are there areas of restriction? So again, just noticing, not needing to change anything at all. And then we usually have a time of applied sound. So again, it's going to depend on the dive itself. But this is a time when we apply our sound either using verbal cues, verbal sounds. So it might be something like, oh, and directing that to a certain area of our body. It might just be a very soft breath. We might also use touch as we apply the sound to direct the sound into our bodies. And we might use imagination, which could also kind of act as a hand sort of directing where we want the sound to go. But we offer the sound up through our intention. And then, like I mentioned before, after applying the sound, that's when we take our pause. We have moments of open attention. And so after we've offered the direction, then we observe, okay, so what's happening in my body now? How is my body responding to the sound? We might want to look for different sensations as we're developing our sensitivity in our being. We might want to even notice what's happening in the space around our body. What's happening between my body and the space? Is there a clear boundary? We want to start to really notice the subtleties. Don't discount anything. And if you can, enjoy some of this increasing sensation. But these periods of open attention, these periods of pausing, it's just as important as the sounding. So even though it may seem like a space of inaction, it's really a time where we begin to develop our sensitivity and receive some of the fruits of our application, of our exploration. Something you also might hear continuum teachers talking about is open movement. So I touched on this briefly before, but open movement is essentially where we take the brakes off, we let go of any particular intention at all, and we just let our bodies be moved. So it might start with just noticing the tiniest sensation, even in our finger. And then that might ripple into our wrist in a way, or our arm in a way that it wants to move. You might feel a subtle impulse. And sometimes we might want to initiate with a tiny bit of movement and then take the brakes off and just see where our bodies take us, where our own fluid intelligence takes us. And then another component of our dives is layering. So layering is essentially just repeating the sequence again. And this can be important because each time we lay sound into our body, or even each time we pay attention to different sensations in our body and maybe things open up, when we do the same thing again, we're essentially dealing with a different body because the body has been changed by what happened before. So layering can be an important way of going deeper into the dive. So what happened for you in the first round of the sequence might have just begun to open the door. And then when we layer, when we do it a second time, that door might open even wider for us to really experience something deeper or fuller. And sometimes one layer could be very quiet, and another layer there could be a lot of movement through it. And there could be a lot of movement your first time and very small little subtle movements the second time. So layering is an important part of our exploration and just getting deeper and deeper, sort of cutting through or diving through, peering through, beginning to feel through those layers of conditioning that we have on ourselves and our body, those things that are limiting. And the more we layer in, the better chance we have at sort of opening up to the fluid intelligence that's underneath that all. And then finally, the last piece of the dive is usually the closing baseline. So essentially, just like we took a baseline in the beginning to understand where we were coming from, and the closing baseline, we again just have let go of all our sounding, all our intentional exploration, and we just notice what's here now. And it's a nice way to compare sort of what you're feeling now to what you were feeling at the beginning of the dive. And when we are able to actually notice differences or notice change, then it becomes easier for our body to be able to actually integrate that change back out into our lives. So that's a really important piece. So essentially with our closing baseline, just like we did with the opening baseline, you might want to just notice what sensations are there for you in that moment. You might want to return to noticing how your body is able to rest into the support beneath it. Notice if anything has changed there, if you're more able to soften into the support or less, or what's happening around that. You also want to maybe take a moment to notice how your breath is moving through your body now. And many times it will have changed. Now, change is certainly not a requirement for a successful experience with a dive, but if it happens, it can help us to know and feel into that so that, like I said, we can integrate it back into our bodies, back into our lives, and also so we can just kind of take some time to absorb the fruits of our discovery, of our dive time together. So I feel like that's a good start in terms of an intro to Continuum, but I will definitely link more resources below so you can take a look at some of the other ways that different teachers have framed Continuum. And I will also put a link below to a video of Emilie Conrad, the founder of Continuum herself, talking about Continuum and doing an introduction to Continuum. And I definitely encourage you to check out some of these other resources and just explore, kind of take in some of the different ways others have talked about Continuum as well, because it can be tricky to talk about. We're talking about an exploration of movement into a place that doesn't use words, so it can be a little bit tricky to then put it into words and describe what we're doing, which again is one reason why I would definitely recommend taking a class and just experiencing it for yourself if you can. Okay, so now that we've had a little introduction to Continuum, a little extended introduction to what a dive is, I would like to lead you into just a mini exploration so that you can have a little taste of what might happen for you in a dive, knowing that every single dive is going to be different. So depending on your sequence, depending on what's happening for you in that moment of time, but I'd love to give you just a little taste for what it can feel like to have a mini Continuum experience. So what I'll have you do is just either you can do this seated if you'd like to, or lying down, whatever's most comfortable for you. But just find yourself a nice, comfortable position, but a place where you can remain alert for the next maybe 10-ish minutes or so. Okay, so once you're settled, just let your eyes start to relax a bit. Let your gaze maybe focus either down towards the floor, let your eyes close completely. Whatever's most comfortable for you. And now just take a moment of open attention here. So we're just going to notice what's here for me right now. How is my breath moving through my body in this moment? Again, without needing to change a single thing, just noticing, just observing. And sometimes when you begin to observe, the body will start to shift or change its own breathing pattern. So if that happens, you just let it and you're just observing. How is it moving? How is it changing? What's next? Or if it's staying the same, you're just observing that. You might want to notice, what are the areas of my body that do move as I breathe? You might want to take a moment to notice the areas of your body that feel supported right now, the areas that are able to soften into the support beneath you, whether that's a cushion or a chair or a mat or the floor, whatever it is that you're resting into. Just notice what areas of my body come down into that place of support. And you might want to take a moment to notice, are there places in my body where I feel restriction? Are there places in my body where I feel freedom? Are there places in my body where I notice movement? And again, not needing to change a thing, but just leaving yourself open to the observation. What's here now? And then as you feel ready, we're going to bring our attention down to the base of our spine, sort of to the root of our torso there and our pelvis. And we're going to direct just a simple sound of O. So you don't have to worry about getting it right or doing it perfect. Just letting a simple sound of O emerge from you and directing it down. We're going to start down just at the base of our spine there, in the base of our pelvis. And we're going to take our time in just letting that O begin to slowly climb up our spine. So this might take a few breaths to do. Just let yourself go at your own pace with this. Let yourself have pauses in between the breath, but just let yourself kind of slowly at your own pace, finding your way from the root of your spine up through to your head. So as you're ready, we'll begin. So for me, with that movement, I've come up to just below my diaphragm area. But for you, you might have only come up to maybe your belly button, or maybe you've come all the way up to your heart space with one O. Wherever it is perfectly fine. Just let yourself have a moment of pause, and as you feel ready, you continue with the O up the spine towards the head. And when your breath runs out, you take another pause. And then as you're ready, continuing up. And once you make it up towards the head, then just let that sound go and take a moment of open attention here, a few moments of open attention where we just notice, what does it feel like in my system now after applying that sound? If there's anything moving or stirring, you can take the brakes off and let that move. But there absolutely doesn't have to be. You're just in a place of noticing. I've put in the call, and now what is my body's response? What's rippling out from that O? And now we're going to take another moment to apply an E sound. So the sound of E. So E. And we're going to direct the E sound. We're going to let it start in the heart center. And then we're going to let that E sound begin to just open out as wide as it wants to go from the heart center. You might want to open out through the arms and just let it go as wide as that E sound wants to go. So I would recommend doing this at least for 3 breaths. You can do more if you'd like, remembering to let yourself have pauses in between. But letting the E start at the heart and radiating out the sides, letting the arms open up to our sides. So as you feel ready, we'll begin. And it can help sometimes to put your hands over the place where you're directing the sound. So maybe experiment with that for this E sound, beginning with the hands starting at the heart, and then as they open, they can come out to the side. So as you're ready. And then once you've done at least 3 of the E sound breath, you can start to let that sounding go and just go into some moments of open attention here, noticing what is the body, my fluid intelligence response to the application of that E sound in this particular place, at this particular moment. And also let yourself take the brakes off to any movement that might want to come, letting yourself have some of what we call open movement here. And again, nothing needs to happen, but you can just stay curious and open to what is my body's response to opening up in that way with my arms, to applying that particular sound in that way. And just taking the brakes off, letting any movement that wants to happen now, just letting that come. You might notice your breath pattern change. You might notice very, very little, but whatever it is, just honor it. Okay, and so for the sake of time, I'm going to call us back towards a place of where we began. So back to a baseline. So if you've moved a little bit, you just want to consciously come back towards the position that you started in. And once again, just notice what's here now. So how is my breath moving through my body now? How am I resting into the support that I have beneath me, around me right now? Are there any new areas of movement or freedom that I'm noticing? Are there areas of restriction? But just noticing, drinking in the fruits of your mini exploration. We'll take just a moment more to do that. And then as you feel ready, letting yourself transition slowly back towards maybe the computer screen or wherever you happen to be watching this. And the transitions are important too, to really honor each transition. Let yourself have a little bit of time to do it slowly, to just kind of come back so that you don't have to rush right back in. You can just kind of take your time and let your system integrate. And then as you're ready, you can go ahead and move on and out into your day. So I hope that you found this little introductory video informative, and hopefully it's given you a little taste of what Continuum is, what it can be. Usually our dive time and our sequences are much longer. We really take our time. We really take the time to slow way down from the busyness of life down into a place where some more slower rhythms, where that rest and digest state, that healing state can be possible, that state of really kind of dropping in and down. Sometimes a continuum dive or class can look like very, very slow, almost hardly any movement. And sometimes there'll be classes that are very kind of vigorous and people are moving and spiraling all over the place. So it really can look like anything, and it really depends on what's going on for the person, what's going on in the particular dive or exploration. So there's lots of possibilities for Continuum, and I hope that you will consider trying a class, whether it's live or virtual, and just opening up to the awesomeness of what Continuum can be. I definitely have to say that for my own life, it has been such a tremendous life-giving gift that not only offers a bridge to my own fluid intelligence during practice time, but also in the rest of my life and beyond. So thanks for taking the time to be with me today, and I look forward to maybe seeing you soon. Take good care.